Hyundai Ioniq 5, Kia EV6, and Ford Mustang Mach E. Which electric car should you buy? That's what we're going to find out. Welcome to Car Help Corner, where we help you, the consumer, master the process of car buying and car ownership. If you're thinking of buying an electric car but want to consider something other than a Tesla, then you need to be taking a closer look at the Hyundai Ioniq 5, the Kia EV6, and the Ford Mustang Mach E. These three EVs are proof that regular mainstream car makers are now fully committed to the electric car market. But the question is, are these EVs really worth considering outside of Tesla? And are they better than similar electric cars like the Subaru Solterra, Toyota bZ4X, or the Nissan Ariya? Well, to find out which one is the best EV, make sure to stick around until the end of the video. So we're going to start things off behind the wheel of the Ioniq 5. Now, I actually have already made a dedicated video on this car, so if you want to get a more detailed look on what the Ioniq 5 is all about, then make sure to take a look at that video. But to basically sum it up, what you ultimately need to know about the Ioniq 5 is that this is a properly designed electric car and a genuine alternative to something like a Tesla. It basically delivers on all the important areas that matter to an electric car buyer. If you're looking for an EV that gives you amazing features and technology for the money, strong performance, and a very good electric range, the Ioniq 5 delivers in all these areas. If you go for the bigger battery pack with rear-wheel drive, for example, you get a range of up to around 300 miles or 480 kilometers, or around 250 miles or 420 kilometers with the optional all-wheel drive. There's also a less expensive standard battery pack that gives you around 220 miles or 350 kilometers, but if it were me, I would definitely be going with the bigger battery pack. And you also get great performance to go with that range as well, with up to 320 horsepower and well over 400 pound-feet of torque for the all-wheel drive model, which is pretty impressive. This thing produces more than enough power, and it's also pretty fun to drive as well, with great handling thanks to that low center of gravity, which helps to reduce body roll. But not only is this a great driving EV, but it's also tops when it comes to its technology and very practical interior too. Even though the Ioniq 5 looks a little bit like a hatchback, it's actually much closer to an SUV in terms of size and interior space. There is a ton of room in here for adults to sit comfortably, and you also get a lot of great storage space too. And in terms of the tech that you get, the Ioniq 5 is very well equipped. The infotainment system consists of a pair of 12-inch display screens which have amazing looking graphics and are pretty easy to use as well. Once you're familiar with the user interface, it's a great system and easily one of the best on the market. And unlike the Mach E, which is almost entirely dependent on the touchscreen to control pretty much everything, in the Ioniq 5 you do get some regular controls for the climate controls and the sound system, which is really nice to have too. It may not be a surprise to learn that many electric cars do feel pretty similar to drive on the road, so when you have an interior as well designed as this, with all this great technology, it really does help set it apart. The only significant issue that I can think of, which has been mentioned in other reviews, is the lack of a rear window wiper, which is a pretty weird thing to see. As weird as that is, fortunately, Hyundai will be adding a rear window wiper for 2023 models, so it's not going to be much of an issue for very long. There's no question that Hyundai set the benchmark extremely high with the Ioniq 5, and this is going to be a very difficult EV to beat. But it's time to get behind the wheel of the next one and see how it compares. Alright, so now I'm behind the wheel of the Kia EV6. Now, it's no secret that this car shares a lot in common with the Ioniq 5. The two cars share the exact same platform and drivetrains, which means they have the same amount of power, a very similar driving feel, and the same amount of driving range too. Which means that just like the Ioniq 5, you get a range between 220 and 300 miles, or 350 to 480 kilometers, depending on whether you go with the standard range or long range battery, or rear wheel or all-wheel drive. Now again, keep in mind that those are just the official numbers, and the real-world range could vary depending on the type of driving that you do and the conditions that you're in. So if you drive in freezing cold weather in the winter time, you could expect to see the range drop by around 10 to 20%. Even so, both the Ioniq 5 and EV6 do have a very good range, and the other thing that they have in common is a very fast charging system too. Both cars use an 800-volt charging system with a charging speed of up to 350 kilowatts, which is a lot faster than a lot of other EVs. That means that on a high-speed charger, you could charge the EV6 from 10 to 80% in under 20 minutes. But realistically, you are going to do the majority of your charging at home using a normal level 2 charger, which takes around 9 hours. Now, not surprisingly, driving the EV6 feels just like driving the Ioniq 5, which is to say it is a great driving car. But not everything is the same between these two cars. Aside from the most obvious difference, which is the exterior styling, the other major differences have to do with the interior. Now, there are some things in here that are no different between the two cars, like for example the pair of 12-inch display screens for your infotainment system. This is the exact same setup and user interface that you'd find in the Ioniq 5, which is a very good thing because this is one of the best infotainment systems on the market. But aside from the displays, everything else is quite a bit different. For example, even though both cars share the exact same platform, it does seem that you do get a little bit less space in the EV6, which I was surprised to see. The difference is quite small, but there's no question that there is a little bit less space in the rear seats and in the cargo area in the EV6. The EV6 also lacks the sliding center console that you get in the Ioniq 5, and the storage space is not quite as good either. And just like the Ioniq 5, the EV6 does unfortunately lack a rear window wiper, which, like I mentioned, is something that should be addressed for 2023. The most glaring issue though with the EV6 versus the Ioniq 5 though has to do with this control setup below the infotainment system. Unlike the Ioniq 5, which has separate controls for your sound system and climate controls, which are pretty straightforward to use, the EV6 has this digital panel that you can switch back and forth. At the touch of a button, this panel can go from being your climate controls to your sound system controls, which is a pretty cool party trick, but in terms of functionality, it is pretty confusing. I'm not too crazy about that part of the interior, but there are some things that I do like better in the EV6. For example, the rotary dial gear selector is more user-friendly than the column-mounted shifter that you get in the Ioniq 5. I also like the fact that the EV6 has a normal sunroof that you can actually open, unlike the Ioniq 5, which has a very nice large glass roof, but unfortunately you can't open it up. Having said that, I'm not sure whether the few good things are enough to offset the bad things like the weird controls or the reduced interior space, so I would have to give the interior win to the Ioniq 5. Now, having said all of that, this is still a very well-designed EV, and for the most part it is pretty neck and neck with the Ioniq 5. Both of them have set the bar extremely high for EVs, and the Mustang Mach E really does have its work cut out for it. So will the Mach E really have what it takes to beat both the Ioniq 5 and the EV6? Well, it's time to get behind the wheel and find out. And finally, behind the wheel of the Ford Mustang Mach E. Now, don't let that name fool you, because this is nothing like a traditional Mustang. Although the exterior design is obviously inspired by the Mustang, this is a regular EV crossover just like the Ioniq 5 and the EV6. Although that being said, the Mach E does feel a lot sportier to drive. The steering has a nice hefty feel to it, there's a bit more firmness in the suspension, and all of the controls just have a sharp responsive feel that you don't quite get in the Ioniq or the EV6. You can really tell that Ford was going for a more engaging, sportier drive, and if you are looking for an EV crossover to have a bit of fun with, then this is the one to go for. You also get plenty of power. Even if you go with the standard range battery, you get over 260 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque, which is a lot more than the standard battery in the Ioniq or the EV6. The larger battery pack version, however, does produce a very similar amount of power with around 350 horsepower and 450 pound-feet of torque. And if you really want to go all out, you could go for the Mach E GT Performance, which gives you a lot more power with a 0 to 60 time of well under 4 seconds. Now, in terms of driving range, the Mach E is very comparable to the other two cars. Ford did increase the battery capacity for 2022, which means you get a range of up to around 300 miles or 480 kilometers with the larger battery pack. And if you want to go for the less expensive standard battery pack with rear-wheel drive, you should get around 230 miles or 360 kilometers. So ultimately then, the Mach E is a lot like an Ioniq 5 or EV6, but with a sportier driving feel. But just because this is a sporty crossover doesn't mean you lose anything when it comes to crossover practicality. Although you don't get quite as much storage space or rear seat headroom and legroom as the other two EVs, there is still plenty of interior space in here, and it does feel more than adequate. You do, however, get a slightly larger cargo area and more cargo space underneath the hood than the other two, which is nice to see. The interior also has a very well-designed upscale feel, much like the other two EVs. Instead of getting a landscape-style touchscreen with controls below it, you get this much larger 15-inch portrait-style touchscreen, which controls pretty much everything inside the car. Now, having all of your controls on the touchscreen does take some time to get used to, but for the most part, it is a well-designed interface with really good-looking graphics and great responsiveness. Frankly, I'm quite impressed with the interior space overall because it does feel a lot more premium than most Ford products. The pricing for the Mach E is considerably higher than both the Ioniq 5 and the EV6, so you are going to be paying a premium if you really like the Mach E. If you really like the way this car looks and really want that sportier driving feel though, I would say that it's mostly worth it because this is a very well-rounded EV. But then the same could be said for both the EV6 and the Ioniq 5, and since both of those EVs do cost considerably less money, I would have to rank them ahead of the Mach E. The fact is that all three of these are extremely well-designed EVs, and if this is going to be your first go at any type of an electric vehicle, you are probably going to be extremely impressed. And when compared to other EVs, they are very competitive. Both the Subaru Solterra and the Toyota BZ4X, for example, are very good alternatives, but they don't have quite as much driving range, so they're not quite as practical for day-to-day use. And even though the Tesla Model Y does have more driving range and access to that amazing Tesla supercharger network, the build quality is a bit more hit and miss, and the pricing can be a lot higher too. There are other EVs to consider, of course, but for the time being, these three are certainly near the top of the pack. So let me know what you think of the 2022 Hyundai Ioniq 5, the Kia EV6, and the Ford Mustang Mach E. Which of these three EVs would you buy, or would you get something else instead? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. You can also take a look at some of my other car videos by checking out these links over here. Make sure to follow me on TikTok and Instagram, and if you need additional car buying advice, recommendations, or help with getting a great deal on your next new car purchase, make sure to check out carhelpcanada.com. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next time.